My story begins with Genesis, the company that sent 6 astronauts on a one-way trip to Mars. They were not just there to visit, but to stay on Mars forever to start humanity's first settlement. The hope was that if they succeeded, more people would be sent to join in the future. 2 months into their journey, the crew leader, Sarah, made a startling discovery. She was pregnant. When the team members and officials on Earth learned this, they were extremely worried. However, the mission continued as planned, and soon after, the crew finally arrived on Mars. As they prepared for landing, it became clear that Sarah was about to give birth. With no other option, the 5 astronauts worked together and successfully helped her deliver a baby boy. Unfortunately, immediately after giving birth, Sarah faced severe health complications due to the low gravity on Mars. Tragically, she passed away. Meanwhile, the team on Earth reviewed the baby's medical reports and discovered something unusual. Having been born in Mars' weaker gravitational environment, the boy's body, particularly his heart, was very different from a child born on Earth. They realized that if the baby were brought back to Earth, he would not be able to survive in Earth's gravity. The head of the Genesis company made a difficult decision. To save the child's life, he had to remain on Mars. However, this would require a substantial amount of money to maintain the Mars project. To ensure they continued to receive funding and protect the future of Mars colonization, the company decided to keep the entire matter a secret from the public. The entire team agreed to keep Gardner's existence, the child born on Mars, a secret. They decided not to disclose any information about him to the outside world. Years passed, and Gardner grew up, and by the age of 16, he had only met 14 people in his entire life. Despite limited interactions, Gardner was exceptionally intelligent. This was partly because he was raised by astronauts, and partly because he was born with a keen mind. Living in the Mars research camp with the astronauts, Gardner always had questions about his past, especially about his parents. He knew nothing about his mother, Sarah, and didn't even know who his father was. These unanswered questions weighed heavily on him, but he had no one to turn to for answers. In the camp, there was a locker that once belonged to his mother, but Gardner didn't know the code to open it. One day, out of curiosity and determination, he hacked the code and opened the locker. Inside, he found a bag containing a ring and a pen drive. Gardner put the ring on his finger and connected the pen drive to the camp's system. Upon opening the files, he discovered a video of his mother on a beach with a man. In the video, his mother was laughing and joking with the man before they both went home. Gardner assumed the man was his father and took a screenshot of him from the video. Meanwhile, Gardner had been chatting online with a girl from Earth named Tulsa. Tulsa was a tomboy, bold and adventurous, who longed for freedom and to travel the world. She told Gardner about her dreams, and he confided in her about his limitations, revealing that he had brittle bone disease, a condition that made his bones fragile and prevented him from leaving Mars. However, Tulsa didn't believe him. She thought he was joking, and imagined he was just a boy living in a tent on Park Avenue in New York City. Tulsa, who had no family, constantly moved between different foster families. She lived with various families for short periods, never having a stable place to call home. On the other hand, Gardner felt increasingly trapped in his isolated existence on Mars. One day, in a moment of frustration and yearning for freedom, he snuck out of the research center and recklessly drove his vehicle at high speed. Unfortunately, his vehicle overturned, putting him in a dangerous situation. After the accident with the overturned vehicle, Gardner found himself in a life-threatening situation when his oxygen tube disconnected, making it difficult for him to breathe. Just in time, Kendra, one of the astronauts who deeply cared for Gardner, arrived and rescued him. She helped him breathe again and brought him back to the research center. Once they were safe, Kendra asked Gardner how he managed to unlock his mother's locker and find the password. Gardner casually replied, saying that since he was raised by scientists, figuring it out was not a big deal for him. After that, Kendra had a serious conversation with the senior head of Genesis, suggesting that Gardner should be brought to Earth as it was his wish. The head also wanted Gardner to come to Earth, but knew that the risks were extremely high due to Gardner's unique condition. He explained that Gardner would need to undergo a series of complex surgeries to survive in Earth's gravity, and even then, it might not be safe. Kendra persuaded him, and eventually, the decision was made to physically train Gardner and prepare him for the necessary surgeries so he could make the journey to Earth. Gardner underwent many difficult surgeries, and his physical condition gradually improved. Kendra was always there to support him every step of the way. When the preparations were complete, Gardner contacted Tulsa on Earth to share the news. He explained that after undergoing surgeries and physical training, he could finally make the journey to Earth, although it would take a few more months. Tulsa, with her usual boldness, told him to hurry up before the foster care system moved her elsewhere. With everything ready, Gardner was set for his journey. As the spaceship headed toward Earth, Gardner turned to Kendra and asked if she knew where his father lived. Kendra gently replied that she didn't know, And when Gardner pressed further, asking if she knew his father's name, she again said no, but assured him that if she knew, she would have told him. When Gardner arrived on Earth, he underwent additional medical tests, but the results were not in his favor. It was clear he might be sent back to Mars, which left him disappointed. Before they could act, Gardner decided to escape. For the first time, he felt the joy of being truly free, running on Earth's surface. He tried to jump as he did on Mars, expecting to leap high due to the lower gravity he was accustomed to, but Earth's stronger gravity prevented it, leaving him slightly disappointed. As he continued to explore, it began to rain, something Gardner had never seen before. While others rushed inside, he stood in the rain, mesmerized by the experience. He enjoyed every moment before catching a bus and heading to Tulsa's university to finally meet her. Kendra and the head of Genesis, suspecting that Gardner would go to Tulsa, rushed to follow him. Gardner arrived at the university, thrilled to see so many children his age for the first time. He spotted Tulsa and happily called her name. She recognized him but immediately slapped him, angry that he had been gone for 7 months without any contact. Gardner, confused, explained that he had been on a special trip and couldn't contact her. After a moment of frustration, Tulsa forgave him but said he needed to join her class when the bell rang. Gardner, not wanting to be separated, followed her into the classroom, where the teacher assumed he was a new student and told him to sit in the back. During class, the teacher asked a question about Thomas Edison, and another student replied that Edison was cool. Gardner corrected, explaining that Edison was responsible for creating direct current while Nikola Tesla invented alternating current, and what made Edison bad was how he treated Tesla. After Gardner's insightful answer in class, the students applauded. They didn't know Gardner was raised among scientists, but they were impressed by his knowledge. When class ended, Tulsa confronted Gardner, demanding the truth. She asked him, "Where are you really from?" Gardner replied, "From Mars." Tulsa laughed in disbelief, thinking he was joking. Gardner insisted, explaining that his mother had passed away when he was born, and now he was on Earth to find his father. He showed Tulsa a photo of his father, but admitted he didn't know where to start looking. Tulsa, sensing his sincerity, agreed to help him, and they decided to search for his father together. They went to Tulsa's home to get some money for their journey. However, the head of Genesis and Kendra, who had been tracking Gardner, appeared. They warned Gardner that his health was deteriorating and insisted he return to Mars with them before it was too late. Gardner, determined to find his father, refused and fled. Kendra and the Genesis head chased him by car. As they were closing in, Tulsa arrived in an old helicopter she found near her house. Although she didn't know how to operate it well, she and Gardner still escaped. However, during the flight, the helicopter ran out of fuel, leading to a hard landing. They barely jumped out just before the helicopter crashed into an old warehouse, causing a massive explosion. Kendra and the Genesis head panicked as they witnessed the explosion, fearing the worst, but soon discovered that Tulsa and Gardner had jumped out safely. Seizing the opportunity, Tulsa and Gardner fled the scene and rented a car to continue their journey. Gardner was filled with wonder and excitement, experiencing Earth for the first time, marveling at everything around him. Along the way, they passed a horse, which frightened Gardner as he had never seen one before. Tulsa was both amused and shocked, still struggling to believe Gardner's story about being from Mars. Gardner only had a photo of his father, but no address. However, he also had his mother's ring. When Tulsa searched for the ring online, she discovered it was a rare and special wedding ring. The search led them to the address of the jeweler who made the ring, and they decided to go there, hoping to find Gardner's father. Meanwhile, Kendra received an urgent call from Gardner's doctor. Gardner's blood test results were alarming. His heart was struggling to cope with Earth's atmosphere and gravity. The doctor warned that the situation was critical, and Gardner's life was in danger if he didn't leave Earth soon. Distraught by the news, Kendra and the head of Genesis redoubled their efforts to find Gardner and Tulsa, fearing for Gardner's life. On the other hand, Gardner and Tulsa were having the time of their lives, enjoying their journey together. They bought new clothes, a tent for camping, and continued their adventure, unaware of the increasing danger. Along the way, their relationship deepened, and they became much closer. Finally, they reached the jeweler who made Gardner's mother's wedding ring. The man gave them an old invoice, which contained an address. With this new clue, they set off for that address, filled with hope. However, during the journey, Gardner's health suddenly deteriorated. His nose began to bleed, and he fell unconscious. Tulsa rushed him to the nearest hospital, where doctors were astonished by what they discovered. Gardner's heart was significantly larger than normal, and his bones had an entirely different structure. Realizing the truth, Tulsa understood that everything Gardner said about being from Mars was true. His body was not made to survive in Earth's gravity. When Gardner regained consciousness, he urged Tulsa to leave the hospital. Although Tulsa was worried, Gardner insisted that the doctors wouldn't be able to help him. He admitted that even though he loved Earth and wanted to stay, Earth didn't seem to want him back. Reluctantly, Tulsa agreed, and they escaped from the hospital just before Kendra and the head of Genesis arrived. However, by the time they reached the hospital, Gardner and Tulsa were already gone. Tulsa and Gardner finally arrived at the address on the jeweler's invoice. It was the house in the photo, and as they entered, they saw the man from the photo sitting inside. Gardner was overjoyed, believing he had finally found his father. He showed the man the photo of him with Gardner's mother, Sarah, and told him she had passed away giving birth to him. Gardner revealed that Sarah Elite was his mother, and he had traveled a long way to meet his father. The man, visibly moved, replied that Sarah's death was an accident. Gardner insisted that what he was saying was true, and that the man was his father. But instead of embracing Gardner, the man became defensive. Overwhelmed with emotion, he told Gardner to stop, threatening to call the police. As he reached for the phone, Tulsa, angry and protective of Gardner, intervened. She pleaded with the man, saying, quote, "He doesn't know anyone on this planet. He's come a long way just to find you, and he's dying." The man, visibly overwhelmed, replied, "I don't know who you are or why you're doing this, but I'm not his father." Tulsa, confused, asked, "Then who are you? You're in his picture." The man hesitated for a moment before revealing, quote, "Sarah was my sister." Tulsa was shocked by this revelation, and as she looked around, she realized Gardner had disappeared. Rushing outside, she saw Gardner walking towards the sea. She yelled, "He's not your father, he's your uncle." Gardner, looking out at the sea, replied softly, "It doesn't matter, my mother was here. I can feel her here. I didn't choose to be born on Mars, but I can choose where I die." Gardner fell into the water, unconscious. Just then, Kendra and the head of Genesis arrived. Together, the three pulled Gardner out of the water and after a tense struggle, saved his life. The head of Genesis, who had always seemed tough, broke down crying. Gardner, now awake but weak, looked at him and asked, "What was my mother like?" The man, tears in his eyes, replied, "She was brave and kind, fearless." Gardner, sensing the truth, said, "You are my father, aren't you?" After a moment of silence, the man nodded and admitted, "Yes, I am." Just then, an ambulance arrived, and they quickly put Gardner inside. He was taken to a nearby airport, where a special plane was waiting. The plan was to take Gardner high enough above Earth's gravity, allowing his body to stabilize. As the plane took off, Gardner's father, extremely worried, sat next to the pilot. Knowing that Gardner's only chance was to escape gravity, he took control of the plane, flying up at maximum speed, despite the pilot's instructions to stay within the atmosphere. As they crossed the atmosphere and entered space, the pull of gravity weakened. Everything inside the plane became weightless. Gardner's health improved almost immediately. He started to feel better, floating in the air along with everyone else. Although Gardner's health had recovered, this moment was bittersweet. Back on Earth, preparations were made to send Gardner back to Mars, as staying on Earth was no longer feasible. Tulsa, Kendra, and Gardner's father were all heartbroken as they said their goodbyes. Gardner was also filled with sadness, but he knew that Mars was where he belonged. He said goodbye to them and returned to Mars. Once back on Mars, Gardner and Tulsa continued their long-distance conversation, talking regularly. One day, Kendra visited Tulsa and surprised her with the news that she had retired and decided to adopt her. Kendra invited Tulsa to live with her and suggested that one day they could train together to visit Gardner on Mars. The movie ends with Gardner and his father walking together on Mars, finally content. Gardner had found the answers he was looking for, and Mars had become his true home. The story concludes with a sense of peace, even though Tulsa, Kendra, and Gardner's father felt the weight of their separation. Although the film was not a box office success, its emotional journey left a lasting impression. That concludes my story. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching until the end, and see you next time.